Hey everyone, it's Lisa from Primitive Gatherings, and today I'm going to teach you how to do a stem stitch on a pre-printed panel. You're going to need some thread. Now I prefer the 5-weight Valdani thread because the coverage on this is so much better if you use a thicker thread. And these are all 12 of the threads that I used on the panel. So then I have a 22 chenille needle, and this is a big needle that will handle the thread for the stitching. So I'm just going to do a quick little thread of this needle. And how I do this is I lay this on my finger, I lay the eye of the needle directly on top of the thread, and I push down and I let go of everything else, and I just move my finger back so it slides right in there, and then I pull it through. So then I'm going to put a knot in, I cross it over, wrap around, pull it through, and wherever I crossed it, that's where the knot is going to go. Now on this panel, you're going to want to clip this nice and close to the knot. You don't want any tails hanging out because they'll peek out under your stitching and be seen once that batting is behind when it is quilted. So let's start with this star right here. It has a lot of little points on here. They're kind of rounded, but there still is a nice way to do those. So I'm going to start with a straight side right here, and I'm going to pull up and I'm going to pull the thread back. Now I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to pull back just a little bit, about 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to go back to the start, right where the first stitch came from. And then I swing it around and go 1/8 of an inch back. Now when I get to this corner, this is where I'm going to change up a little bit. I'm going to take even tinier stitches right around that little curve. And that's so if you took 1/8 inch stitches, they would kind of, roll over and they wouldn't look as nice. So right on this little curve here, I'm going to take tiny, tiny stitches. So every time you go around these points on the stars, you're going to do about 3 little stitches. One little one on the top, and then one more on this side coming down. So those are probably about 1/2 of an 1/8, which is a 1/16. And then you're going to go back to your 1/8 inch stitching on the straight sides. So I'll just do a couple more stitches, but this is all there is to it. This is called a stem stitch. When you look at books or other people doing this, they might do it different than what I do. A lot of the diagrams, like you'll see in books, it'll say to go halfway, but you really want to go all the way back to that last stitch to complete the stitch. Now see how it makes like a beautiful rope? If you would throw the thread the other way, like if I kept throwing it to the right instead of to the left, it would look more like a wire. It would look like it's pulled and it wouldn't have that braided look to it. So every time you stitch, make sure you toss your thread to the left. So that's it. You just do a lot of that stitch. Let's go over a couple of the questions that I always get when I do these panels. You do not have to starch the panel. Fray check the edges or stay stitch about 1/8 inch all the way around your panel's edge, because you're going to be carrying this around for a while and the edges will fray if they're just the raw edges from when the panel was cut at the quilt shop. However, I do want to point out on the previous panels, there was no issues with anything, but this fall panel is going to be trimmed to 35.5. You're going to get a 36 inch cut. So there's hardly any room there. So please, fray check or stay stitch that's edges on there. I do not use a hoop when I stitch. You can, however, if you feel more comfortable. Like I said, there is no right or wrong way to do most things. The printed lines will not disappear once it's washed. So I know that in the past we'd get things printed on and they would disappear with washing. These lines are printed into the fabric and they will not disappear. Remember, a 22 chenille needle is the best needle for stitching. Big eye, and it's a little larger wool applique needle, and that opens up the hole from the last one for you to go right into, so that really helps. Again, use smaller stitches at the points. Cut all your tails close. So let's pretend that I ran out of thread, and I'm going to go to the back side here, and let me just show you how I would end. So I'm going to pull my thread, I'm going to go into one of the stitches, and I'm going to make a loop, and I'm going to go through that loop once, and I'm going to pull that tight. So now it's a knot. But then I might just take and bury my tail just a little bit in 1 or 2 stitches, and then I can cut it close. Again, leaving no tails because you don't want them to see through. Once your panel is stitched, you're going to want to put on a lightweight fusible interfacing. Moda has a really nice new one that they just sourced, so ask for those. I'm sure that they can link that in the video as well, but you want a lightweight. You don't want a heavier one. And the reason why you're going to do that after you stitch is because if you're going to use this panel with patchwork blocks, you want it to have like the same weight as the blocks. You don't want this to have nothing and then those blocks have piecing in it and they'll be heavier. So if you put that fusible interfacing on that middle panel, it'll bring the weight even from the patchwork blocks to the quilt panel. Also, if you ever have to cut your panel and you have to cut through some of the threads, that interfacing will hold those tails where you cut your thread. So that fusible will hold that in place and it won't unstitch itself. You're going to press the panel right side down on a fluffy towel with lots of steam before you put that fusible interfacing on. And then you're going to check your panel for any stray threads, any fuzz, anything like that. And then you're going to cut your fusible web and lay that down. I had to use 2 pieces because it was only 20 inches wide, but you just put it right next to each other. You don't overlap it, just lay them nice and close together. And if you have a nice ironing surface, that helps a lot. So lay it out on your ironing surface, press it all, steam it all really good, lay your interfacing down. Now, here's a tricky thing. I don't want to put my iron directly onto that fusible interfacing. So what I do is I take like a piece of Bella Solid, light colored, and I lay it, maybe like a ½ yard, and I lay it down and I start pressing from the middle of the panel out to the edges. And then when I ran out of that space, I move it and keep going that way. So you're always pressing from the middle out or from the center that way. So you're going to always move that fusible web to the outside. Remember to use the bumpy side of the fusible web down to the back side of the panel. And then you're going to have to cut the panel to the correct size that it says so in your directions. So whether you're making the fall panel like I'm demoing now, or you're doing Sam the Snowman or Dear Santa, they all probably have a different size that you're going to cut for. So make sure you check your measurements on your pattern. And one of the things that you can do is, I know it's scary to cut a big panel because we're cutting like 35.5. So what I do is I'll take one ruler this way and then the other ruler this way. So then you have a long cutting surface this way. So I have more than one 24-inch ruler in my arsenal. So don't be afraid to have more than one 24-inch ruler. If you do want to watch some more videos on me stitching, I do have one on my YouTube channel and it's August 8th, and my channel is called Stitch with Lisa Bongean. Wasn't this fun? And I hope you enjoy stitching this panel as much as I loved creating it for you.